Michael Jordan's been named the greatest basketball player to have ever lived ever since he retired, and since he stepped away from the game almost 30 years ago, he's had a mystique about him that makes you really wonder what he's been up to. The only time we hear from him are when he makes headlines from a big event or continues to make achievements in his life. And we're gonna get to all that, but let's take a quick look at what led him to that point. So we all know the story and career of Michael Jordan. Not much needs to be said there, but I want to mention 5 of the key factors off the court that really led him to where he's at today after his NBA career. The first is family. The start of his basketball journey came with major help from his older brother, Larry Jordan, who MJ would compete against every single day. Larry was a few years older, so he got him into basketball, and that also meant that when they'd hoop in the driveway, Larry would always come out on top. It played a major part into where his competitiveness came from, which we'll get into in a minute. During his career, he also had his 2 sons Marcus and Jeffrey Jordan, and had a great relationship with his late father, who he had that Father's Day game for. The next factor though is his competitiveness. It was probably the most important factor that led him to becoming the GOAT. He always took things to another level with competition, sometimes for good and sometimes for bad, which makes people bring up the third factor in his personality. He's often criticized and categorized as a jerk due to all the stories that have come out about him during his playing career. Stories about how he talked down to his teammates and trash talked his opponents. He went too far a lot of times, and he might not have the greatest personality overall, but I think we'll see that at least in his post-career, he's really taking care of the people and things that matter most to him. Then finally, the last 2 factors go together in his shoes and his popularity. We've never seen a player have a career that made him as massively popular as Michael Jordan did. I mean, even still to this day, almost 30 years later, there's never been an NBA Finals that had better ratings than Jordan's last championship run. He really took the league to a new level of popularity, and he led the charge, which is why he used that popularity to make his own shoe brand, and it blew up. It's one thing to be extremely popular and make a product to sell, but all the shoes he came out with were so unique and had the ability to be worn on and off the court, and that was what made them so special. At the time, they weren't nearly as popular as they are today, but his career was the takeoff point for the Jordan brand, and what he did with it after retiring has been the most impressive. Now, even though Michael was the most popular man in NBA history, today he makes rare public appearances and remains relatively quiet in terms of media in general. So where and what has he been up to? Well, his career officially ended in 2003 and is now 2024, so that's a lot of time to cover. So we're just gonna keep it simple and look at where Jordan's been the last 10 years or so since 2014. And in 2014, it came out that that was the first time, thanks to his Jordan shoes, where he made more money in a single year than he had during his entire NBA career, which was about $100 million. And the crazy part is things only continued to skyrocket from there. And it all goes back to the foundation he set during his career. The shoes, his massive popularity, and the competitive drive that wouldn't allow him to fail. He also was able to promote his brother Larry, who works as part of the Charlotte Hornets, to the team director of player personnel. It's a cool moment to see situations where players give back in these ways to their family members that love the game but maybe weren't good enough to make it as an actual player. Jordan's a big family man, and this is a great example. And speaking of the Hornets, MJ had owned the team for a while at this point, and as we know, for the entire time he did, he made one terrible decision after another. Well, they didn't stop even in 2015 when it was reported that in that year's draft, the Hornets, aka Michael Jordan, refused to take 4 first-round picks from the Boston Celtics for their 9th overall pick. The Celtics wanted to use it to draft Justice Winslow, but MJ said no so he could draft Frank Kaminsky. There's no making up how tragically terrible this dude was at running that team, and we'll get more into that throughout the video. Now, while Michael would have loved for his 2 sons to be great NBA players just like himself, that never panned out. Both Marcus and Jeffrey went to UCF on basketball scholarships, and were pretty terrible. Then they both just gave up halfway through their times there and quit the team altogether. So in 2016, Marcus Jordan had a lot of free time, and with it he opened an exclusive shoe store called Trophy Room, but sadly a couple years later it closed down. While on the other hand, Jeffrey has remained relatively quiet honestly over the course of his whole life. Nothing notable has really ever come from him. 2016 was a busy year though for his father, seeing that he officially became the first billionaire NBA player ever. And on top of that, he was even awarded a Presidential Medal of Freedom from Barack Obama, so that made it a pretty tough year to top. But in 2017, he continued to rack in the money, some of which he used to become a part owner of the Miami Marlins. If he couldn't play baseball good enough, he was just gonna buy a whole team. He was even named the athlete with the highest career earnings ever by Forbes, and he used $7 million of those earnings to fund 2 family clinics in his hometown. So even though he might get a bad rap for who he is as a person, he actually does a lot of good. Now, after all the time they spent together, you would think himself and Scottie Pippen remained a close close over the years, but the two have had a very difficult relationship ever since they retired. It seems like every year they're either feuding and not on good terms, or have made up and are friends once again. And right now it seems like their relationship is as weird as ever, but we'll get to that. 2018 though was one of those rare good years, because Scottie came out and said publicly that MJ carried him for like 11 years of his career, which contradicts a lot of things he's said in the past and since then. Away from the court though, the restaurant business is apparently another thing that Michael's been heavily involved in. He's owned multiple, but his popular steakhouse in New York City closed down that same year. He also donated over $2 million to his hometown of Wilmington, North Carolina when a hurricane hit in 2018. So he definitely does his fair share of charity work. In 2019, it came out that he was now making $145 million a year thanks to his Jordan brand. That's not even including any of his other hundreds of investments and businesses that he has, including the Charlotte Hornets, which he sold a small piece of this year, which was the right move and would lead into the much bigger change he would make later on. MJ would continue his charity work though and raise more than $5 million for Make-A-Wish, as well as donating over $1 million to the Bahamas recovery after a hurricane. And for as good as that was, in 2020 Michael made his biggest donation yet, where he pledged that himself and the Jordan brand would be donating $100 million over the next 10 years to help racial equality, social justice, and education access. It was also the same year The Last Dance came out. It was extremely popular and shed a new light on his career. I mean, it was backstage footage and stories that he refused to be released to the public for years until now. The whole documentary was pretty controversial, and due to how the story was told, it once again ignited a feud between himself and Scottie Pippen. Off the court, he started his own NASCAR team, which was a pretty unexpected business for him. He may be the most diversified man in the world. I just didn't see a NASCAR team coming for him. But sadly, none of us could have seen it coming on what would be his most memorable moment from 2020. Giving a speech in the Lakers arena remembering his good friend Kobe Bryant, who passed away. He was Kobe's idol and they were extremely close, so aside from the crying Jordan meme, it was the only time we've ever seen this side of Michael Jordan. The years carried on though, and we again saw another side of Michael at the Players Reunion when the NBA 75th anniversary team was announced. Obviously he was on it, and it was great to see him interact with his old friends from back in the day and current players in the league now. Players even came out and said afterwards that it was crazy to be around him, and how when MJ walked in a room, everyone would stop and just kind of stare at him, because he's a guy you don't see around too often and was just that good. It was the same year that Adam Silver and the league announced that they were changing the league MVP to the Michael Jordan Trophy, and it made sense to name it after a guy who won 5 of them. I don't really love the design or the name being just his name, but maybe it'll grow over the years. In 2022, the Scottie Pippen MJ feud opened up another new chapter when his son Marcus started dating Larsa Pippen, aka Scottie's ex-wife. And the whole thing's crazy. She dated Malik Beasley, who was on the same team as her son, and now she's engaged to a man who she watched grow up from being a little kid. She married Scottie in 1997 while he was still playing with MJ, which means she likely first met Marcus when he was 7 years old. And now they're engaged? Then she apparently came out and said she was traumatized when Michael said he didn't approve of their relationship at all. Like, she really didn't see that coming. She thought he was just gonna be fine with it. I don't know, but apparently Marcus likes chaos, because he came out and publicly said that he wants his dad to be the best man at the wedding. The whole thing's just so weird. But aside from the weirdness, Michael Jordan had a busy 2023, because it now came out that his net worth was $3 billion after he sold his majority stake in the Charlotte Hornets, and man, it was time. The greatest player of all time has officially gone down as the worst GM and NBA team owner of all time. All the choices he made over the years were so terrible it hurt. Like, he got so mad at Jerry Krause for the team decisions he made and all, but apparently the job wasn't so easy after all, now was it? Shockingly though, the last major thing he did for them was pick Brandon Miller second in the draft over Scoot Henderson, so at least he finally did one thing right on the way out. On the bright side though, after selling the team for all that money, he did a good thing and donated $10 million to the Make-A-Wish Foundation. So that catches us up pretty well to where one of the mysteriously quiet men in the NBA has been over the years. His shoes are more popular than ever now, he's donating more money to charities than he ever has, his life is as complicated as ever, and since selling the team, he suddenly is going to be having a lot more free time than ever before. So with all these business ventures he's already in, it'll be exciting to see what he comes up with next. Sure, MJ does some questionable things, but overall, I think he's a good guy.